Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into the hidden, microscopic plumbing and high-tech food networks working silently inside everyday plants. It's an entire world operating right in front of us, every single day.
Think about it. How do plants eat and drink without mouths? How do they pump fluids hundreds of feet into the air without a heart or any muscles? Well, today, we're shrinking down. We're going to follow the actual, physical journey of water and nutrients to find out exactly how they pull this off.
To get how this hidden infrastructure works, we basically just need to look at a plant's two main biological highways. On one side, you've got the xylem. Think of the xylem as a high-powered water elevator. On the flip side is the phloem, which is basically a highly efficient sugar subway. And together, these two continuous channels are what keep the entire organism alive.
Section 1. Sourcing the water.
So let's start at the very bottom, looking at where a plant actually finds its water before it even begins that massive upward journey. It's actually wild how diverse their strategies are. While most plants rely on soil water, specifically tapping into the tiny capillary gaps between dirt particles, others have totally different approaches. Some use massive root systems to tap into deep groundwater. Epiphytes literally pull moisture right out of the air, and woody plants in marshy areas, they just drink straight from surface water.
But finding the water is just step one. Getting it inside is the real trick. For water to cross into the root hairs, it first goes through a process called imbibition. It gets drawn in by hydrophilic, or water-loving substances right in the cell walls, like cellulose and pectin. Honestly, it's exactly like watching a dry sponge eagerly soak up a spill on your kitchen counter.
Now, imbibition is really just the opening act. To get that water all the way into the cytoplasm, root cells actively absorb mineral ions, things like potassium and nitrate. This pumps up the solute concentration inside the cell, creating the perfect biological conditions to pull that water straight through the plasma membrane via osmosis. It's an incredibly clever use of concentration gradients.
Section 2. The upward climb. Okay, so the water is inside the root, but now it faces a literal uphill battle. How does it defy gravity to travel all the way up a towering tree to reach the highest leaves? The ascent of sap, which is what we call this upward movement, doesn't use a mechanical pump. Instead, it relies on this brilliant three-step physical combo that pushes and pulls the water upward.
Here's how they tag-team the job. At night, root cells create turgor pressure. This is an internal water pressure that makes the cells firm, and it actively pushes water up the lower stems and branches. But during the day, the transpirational loss of water from the leaves, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, creates a massive suction. It acts like a giant vacuum, just pulling the water upward to replace whatever was lost to the sun.
And while all that pushing and pulling is happening, capillarity is working around the clock. It uses intermolecular forces of attraction, specifically cohesive forces that hold the water molecules together and adhesive forces that make them cling to the walls to keep that water continuously creeping up the plant's microscopic xylem tubes.
Section 3. The sugar subway.
All right, so once the water finally reaches the leaves, photosynthesis kicks in and creates food in the form of sucrose. But how does that food get back down to the rest of the plant? Enter the pressure flow hypothesis. The plant actively transports sucrose into companion cells and then into the sieve tubes of the phloem. Pumping all that sugar into these tubes creates heavily hypertonic conditions, meaning a super high concentration of solutes.
And because nature always wants to balance things out, water from the adjacent xylem actually rushes into the phloem via osmosis. This sudden rush of water creates immense osmotic pressure, which acts as the driving force to push that nutrient-rich sap toward areas of low pressure. It basically delivers the food directly to the cells that need it. But here is what's truly mind-blowing. When conditions get tough, plants can literally reverse this entire flow. They can take stored food from the sink, where they kept it, and move it backward, back up to the source, to ensure they survive. It's basically a two-way emergency subway system.
Section 4. Essential elements for life. So, aside from water and sugar, plants also have a very strict menu of minerals they need to thrive. And for an element to be considered essential and actually make it onto this menu, the criteria are incredibly tough. It absolutely has to be necessary for normal growth, completely irreplaceable by any other element, and directly involved in the plant's metabolism. If even one is missing, the plant just cannot complete its life cycle.
Amazingly, out of all the elements on Earth, a plant relies on exactly 17 essential elements for survival. Think about that. Just 17 ingredients are all it takes to build a towering redwood or a sprawling field of crops.
These 17 elements are basically broken down by quantity. First, we have macronutrients, which the plant needs in bulk. We're talking 10 millimoles per kilogram of dry mass or more. These are your heavy hitters like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and potassium. Then you have the micronutrients, things like iron, copper, and zinc. Now, the plant only needs these in trace amounts, but they are absolutely just as critical for survival.
And these elements aren't just sitting around taking up space, they're doing some heavy lifting. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen are structural. They physically build the biomolecules of the cells. Phosphorus is a crucial part of ATP for energy, while magnesium is literally at the heart of chlorophyll. Potassium even plays a mechanical role, altering osmotic pressure to physically open and close the leaf stomata. And elements like zinc and magnesium act as these vital on and off switches for enzymes.
Section 5. Alternative plant diets.
You know, we usually think of plants as being strictly autotrophic, meaning they just quietly make their own food using the processes we just covered. But the plant kingdom has some serious rule breakers. Some have evolved to be literal vampires. Complete parasites like Cuscata have totally given up on making their own food. They just latch onto a host plant and steal all their nutrients. Meanwhile, incomplete parasites like Viscus album are a bit more independent. They do some of the work themselves, but still siphon off a good chunk of what they need from an unwilling host. Then you've got the Saprophytic scavengers. These guys absorb their food strictly from dead organic matter, basically acting as the cleanup crew for the forest floor. And finally, there are symbiotic organisms. Lichens are a perfect example of this. It's this mutually beneficial roommate situation, where algae and fungi team up, combining their unique strengths to survive together in places neither of them could conquer alone. So, having seen the complex plumbing of the xylem and phloem, those powerful physical forces defying gravity, and the honestly shocking parasitic and symbiotic diets of these silent biological factories, it really changes how you look at nature, doesn't it? Next time you step into a forest, or honestly, even just look at a houseplant on your desk, ask yourself, what invisible forces are pumping beneath that bark? And really, who is feeding who? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.